All right, hello everybody. Here we are. I'm here to tell you about the final project for the course. You'll be arranging a solo piano piece by Satie for your own ensemble. And your ensemble has to be 6 or more instruments with any combination of instrument or voice. And you'll make the whole arrangement in Finale, export as a PDF and a WAV. And then the really fun part of this assignment is you'll make a remix of that same assignment using a MIDI export. So this is due May 5th on Course Connect. And next week, April 28th, I'll be asking you to show me a rough draft. So we'll be in touch about that. So submission files in the end, PDF of your arrangement, WAV file of your arrangement, and then you'll be sending an MP3 or a link to your remix. So I have a little presentation to give you some background on the piece and about MIDI itself. So Eric Satie, this is the score that I'm providing you that you'll make an arrangement of, was a French composer, pianist, and in many ways he was a groundbreaker, Henri composer in person, and he challenged what was the norm for composition at the turn of the 20th century, and in many ways laid the groundwork for, we could say, ambient music and for minimalism too. So challenging all these boundaries. He also liked to use absurd or funny titles in his pieces. He has a piece called Piece in the Form of a Pear. He has another piece called Desiccated Embryos. So kind of playing with what was acceptable for art music, not only in concept but in title. The piece that we're going to work with is a set called the Gymnopédies, and these were solo piano pieces, and these are the simple, slow, meditative, we could say non-functional harmony. And in many ways he's sort of saying to the established composers, this could be considered legitimate too, even though it's anti-virtuosic. There's no sort of showing off in this, no fancy technique. Anybody with basic piano skills can play this. But in many ways, his aesthetic here, we could say, is a precursor to ambient music and to a lot of the music that we hear today, especially mood-based sort of background music. So let's just take a little listen. I've posted these videos. These are just YouTube videos in this presentation, and the links are posted if you want to listen to the full version. But let's just take a few second listen to the Gymnopédie that you'll be arranging. So that gives you an idea of the vibe. Another video I've posted is an orchestration that Debussy did of this piece to give you an example of what's possible. There's a lot of really interesting things you can actually do with the orchestration, even though it's a very simple piece. You'll see he's got the full strings, 2 harps. The cymbal part is actually really interesting, and then winds on the top. So let's just take a little listen to this. You can study this more on your own to get ideas. And you can see there where at the section change, he changes the texture. He gives the melody to the oboe, and the strings start doing something different. So you can already start to think about, when you take a look at this piece and listen to these, how you might adapt for your ensemble. So the scoring requirements in this are at least 2 treble instruments, at least 2 chordal instruments, so instruments that can play more than one note at a time, bass, and percussion. You also have to include at least 1 transposing instrument, just to give you an experience of working with transposing instruments. And it can't be transposing by octaves. So piccolo, which is an octave higher, or guitar, for example, don't count as your transposing instrument. So it can't be one that transposes by octave. You must arrange the entire piece as well. So there's been lots of examples of students, a lot of people do kind of crazy stuff with this, but you could do more conventional things with string-based quintet or quartet, brass quartet, obviously band, choir, orchestra mix will work if you want to go for a more conventional ensemble. So a little bit about, in a second I'll show you some examples, but a little bit about what MIDI is, since this class is called MIDI publishing. It stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface, so it's an acronym. And MIDI is a little bit like what we call the early piano rolls, or how a music box works. There's sort of punches in this roll that tell the keys where to go. And this is what MIDI is like. MIDI is just these dots or these punches in the paper that tells a programming procedure what to do when. So MIDI is not actually a sound. It's just the programming language with which things are produced. So let me show you this little video. It's kind of interesting. This is a guy playing on a piano roll, in case you don't know what it is. And I'll just play this for you and get an idea of it.
Okay, we'll now show you how to play Boogie Woogie on the player piano. Take the roll, stick it on the spindles, and a little tapey thing, hard to do with one hand, and we find the little pin that wants to grab it. Okay. Now we're playing a 1941 era, 1939 song called Boogie Woogie, tempo of 85. Set that down here until that says 85, which it about does. Switch this, oddly enough, to off. Shift the air motor right there into the playing position. I'll pump those pedals with my feet. And away we go. Hold on. There's the motor. Here from the
point of that. It's actually pretty amazing if you think about this early way that an instrument could be played without a human actually playing it, which we all take for granted now. And this was the programming language, was the dots, the punches taken out on the paper. So MIDI, what MIDI's not, it's not a sound. It can't communicate audio. It can't create sounds. All it does is tell devices what to do when. And in fact, if you set up a MIDI studio in your house, the audio and MIDI paths have to have different chords. They can't even share the same record for transmitting data. MIDI can also not control audio. It's very interesting. Why MIDI? So people made all kinds of synthesizers and devices, drum machines, when this started happening. And so this is into the 20th century. And it created a need for a common language so that all these things could communicate with computers. Before MIDI, if you wanted something, you had to play it in real time. So now MIDI allows complete control of editing, programming notes, adding layers, dynamics, timbres, effects, and that's what you'll get to play with when you make your remix. So, and Moog is probably one of the most famous synthesizers. Bob Moog, who was the pioneer of the synthesizer and made the first viable one on the market. So he's an important name associated with MIDI as well. All right, so let's go to the score. I have a previous student's project to show you. This is a finished product, but just to give you an idea of his ensemble, he was a saxophonist, so he picked some saxophones. His chordal instruments were tubular bells and vibraphone, so he went a little adventurous for that. And he had the triangle as his percussion. One thing I want to show you first is if you're working with, when you're working with your transposing instruments, you want to enter your notes in C. So make sure all your parts have the same key signature. If they don't, check up here in Document. There's this item, Display in Concert Pitch. If I uncheck that, you'll see now all of saxophones are transposing instruments, so they've got a different key signature. Be sure that you enter your notes while in concert pitch, because the score I'm giving you is for the piano in concert pitch. I've had many people enter things entirely wrong because they were entering C parts into transposing instruments. So make sure you're working in C when you start entering your notes.